I love it when you activate your hips and put your ass out. Got a nigga wanting it so bad I'm about to pass out. I can't deny it, I'm a straight rider. You don't wanna fuck with me. Got the police busting at me, but they can't do nothing to a G. Some say the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. I say the darker the flesh, then the deeper the roots. Now, these are just a few of the lyrics that were bestowed upon us during the glorious and quite eventful lifetime of a Mr. Tupac Shakur. For those that know me personally and not so personally, you would know that I have a rather, some would say, perhaps unhealthy obsession with Tupac. My girl would call it a man crush. I just call it deep admiration. You know, I want to take you guys back to a beautiful time in my life and a beautiful year in particular, 2004. I recall that I was a wee little lad. I was upstairs in the family game room and I was playing with some action figures, and you know, part of my my play set included a very valuable CD collection that my dad sort of built throughout his 20s and the early 90s. A majority of the collection was built when he was stationed in Germany back in his military days. And one CD in that collection really caught my eye because on the cover of that CD case, there was a black man donning a bandana who was extremely close to the camera, making direct eye contact with the lens. And in the bottom left corner of that CD case read the name Tupac. I said, that's peculiar. What the fuck is a Tupac? Because see, in my dad's CD collection, it was all old, very like valuable, badass CDs. But one thing about them, they were easy to pronounce. Oh, the Chronic. Oh yeah, NWA. Oh yeah, Eric B. and Rakim. I could pronounce these names, but what the fuck is a Tupac? So my curiosity gets the best of me, and I stop what I'm doing. I stop playing, and I go on my dad's CD collection. I grab the CD. I go into my room, and I do some very much 2004 shit. I plug in the CD to a boombox that I had, and I began listening to Tupac. And I don't know why Tupac's lyrics had such a profound effect on me at the age of whatever the fuck I was. I must have been 7, 8, but it did. And while I'm listening to the CD, I recall my dad walking in and he sees me listening to this raunchy ass hip hop album, and he doesn't do what I feel like most parents would have done. You know, he doesn't just shut the CD off immediately. He sits there and he kind of catches a vibe a little bit. And it looks like he's even taken back to his prime, his early 20s when he bought that CD. And he began to sit and talk to me and sort of take me through the life and times of a young Tupac Shakur. And I was enthralled. Like I said, man, this guy was in every right something special, man, from the music that he put out to what he stood for to all that he was able to accomplish in his very short lifetime. And over the span of his lifetime, he accomplished a whole lot. But in the last 2 years of his lifetime especially, he must have squeezed in about 4 lifetimes within the last 2 years of his short life. So, I mean, to study this guy is quite incredible. And I realized that from a very young age. What I also realized is how he was tragically taken away from us at such a young age. I mean, this guy was literally in the prime of his life when it was snatched away to mindless gun violence, you know? And there's one peculiar thing about the death of Tupac. It's not so much how it happened. It's not so much why it happened. It's not so much when it happened. But who did it? Who's responsible? I mean, a man's life that's so storied, so eventful, and is so ahead of its time gets snatched away in literally seconds. And that's it. There's no justice. And it's been like that for the past 26 years, up until very recently, up until the past 72 hours, actually, when it is believed that the killer or an affiliate of the killer was arrested in Los Angeles, California. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. We'll get to that. What I would like to discuss is the final 24 hours of Tupac's life and the events that would follow, all the way up until the arrest of a Mr. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis. I hope I'm getting that name right. I got all the names, and I went into a bit of a rabbit hole for this here situation. You know, I have pages here worth of notes. I have documents left open on my iPad here. So I'm ready to go. So, you know, it's going to be a lot of peeking at my notes while I'm telling you this story, but I want to make sure I get all the information correctly. So in the final moments of Tupac's life, the final 24 hours, it starts on September 6th, where you have a Mr. Tupac who is wrapping up a music video for the song Toss It Up in a studio in Los Angeles, California. He heads home after the shoot and he swiftly gets to bed and goes to sleep because he knows that in the morning he has to get on the road to attend a Mike Tyson versus Bruce Seldon fight, as well as a birthday celebration for one of the producers of the Death Row record label. So he wakes up the following morning. It's now September 7th, the morning of September 7th, 1996. He wakes up and it's he and his longtime girlfriend at the time, I believe fiance, Miss Kidada Jones, daughter of actually the legendary producer, Quincy Jones. So they get up and they're packing, and he's in his mansion in Los Angeles. They're packing, they're getting ready to get on the road. And in many interviews after that fateful night, Kidada Jones is often quoted saying that, you know, throughout that entire morning and day even, it seemed that something was off with Tupac. It seemed as if he wasn't into what was happening that day. He wasn't into the plans. He didn't want to go to Las Vegas. Now, some chalk this up to the growing tension between, at the time, Death Row owner Suge Knight and Tupac as far as their business handlings, and others would chalk it up to the overall contentment that he felt towards the record label Death Row that he was a part of. But I think it's rather easy to speculate that, I don't know, I mean, you could say that Tupac was a rather omniscient guy in his lifetime. He knew things that it seemed like he shouldn't have known. And he was one to always speak about his demise. He was almost obsessed with it, you know? So I'm led to believe, you know, what if the reason he didn't want to attend is not because of some shallow business dealings, but because he knew that something bad was to happen to him or his girlfriend, God forbid, or a close affiliate. He may have had a feeling deep down that something wasn't right. Well, despite his best judgment, he and Kidada Jones, they all pile into their vehicles and the rest of the Death Row affiliates, and they began to make their way to Las Vegas, Nevada. And one key detail that I don't want to leave out is Kidada Jones actually suggested that Tupac bring his bulletproof vest, which he was very known for wearing, to Las Vegas. But he denied because it's the desert, for God's sakes, and so he didn't want to be too hot, he says. And so they proceed to Las Vegas without the bulletproof vest, which could have potentially saved his life. They get on the road, and at around 3 p.m., they finally make it to Las Vegas, Nevada. And they do what most 20-something-year-olds would do when you're in Las Vegas, Nevada. They fucking party. They enjoy the city. They gamble. You know, they do what rock stars do. The night continue, or the evening, the afternoon continues on, and it rolls into the evening time, 6:15 to be exact. Tupac and his death row affiliates head to the MGM Grand, but before doing so, Tupac and Kidada Jones, as well as Tupac's cousin, whose name I forget at the moment, please forgive me, they check into their hotel. And as I said earlier, Tupac was, again, showing signs that something was not right in Las Vegas that night, almost as if he knew something bad was to happen. To the point that his paranoia, he told his girlfriend as well as his cousin that they are to stay in their hotel room for the entirety of the evening, not to come out even to the lobby. When asked why, Pac said that he didn't feel safe with them being in the city with him and the death row affiliates. Now, death row in Las Vegas at that time had a very symbiotic relationship. You know, Tupac repped Los Angeles, even though he was born in Harlem. He repped Los Angeles and the West Coast to the fullest, you know. But there was a very special bond that Tupac and Suge Knight and the entire death row label, Snoop Dogg included, had with the city of Las Vegas. You know, if the city of Los Angeles was the place for business, Las Vegas was their regular vacation spot. I mean, they had real estate in Las Vegas. They even owned a nightclub in Las Vegas, Club 662, where Tupac was actually scheduled to perform that night. So it's very strange that Tupac all of a sudden had this new and profound anxiety about being in that city that night. So much so that he would, I don't want to say force, but urge that his girlfriend and cousin stay safeguarded in their hotel room, even though they had been there together countless times before. So anyway, 6:15 rolls around. Tupac, Suge Knight, and the rest of the death row affiliates make their way to the MGM Grand to attend the Mike Tyson versus Bruce Seldon fight. You'll hear me throughout, a lot of this talk about the affiliates of Tupac, what he would call his hangers on, the people that were around him. Tupac was known for, towards the end of his life, glorifying a lifestyle that it's believed he really didn't live, or didn't have to live, at least. Tupac's life could be plagued with a lot of situations that could be categorized as rather uneventful. A lot of trouble he found himself in. But if you knew Tupac, he was never the type to go looking for trouble, but trouble always seemed to find him. Well, that's where the entourage comes into play. Six months prior to that fateful evening, hired security of Tupac and affiliates of Death Row and affiliates of the MOB, it's a famous blood gang in California, were at a mall in Los Angeles, California. And one of the staples of the Death Row record label and its affiliates was that once you become affiliated with Death Row, you are given a golden Death Row chain with a big Death Row medallion. And all the affiliates and all the members of the Death Row record label had this chain, including the MOB gang members that were affiliated with Tupac at the mall that day. And one of the affiliates, Mr. Trayvon Trey Lane, was among that group in the mall. And they're doing their shopping. They're living their best life. And while they're there, they are approached by a group of rival gang members, the Southside Crips, the Southside Compton Crips to be exact. And among the Southside Compton Crips within that group was a young man by the name of Orlando Baby Lane Anderson. And of course they do, upon seeing each other, they do what rival gang members do when they're in close vicinity. They fucking fight. A fight ensues in the mall, and it results in Tupac's affiliate, Trayvon Trey Lane, being robbed of his Death Row chain, never to be seen again, at least he thinks, until 6 months later at the MGM Grand, when, after the 1 minute 49-second Bruce Seldon fight, it was fucking absolutely demolished by Mike Tyson. The fight didn't last long. Tupac and the affiliates began making their way back into the lobby after said fight. Now, Tupac actually didn't even go into the venue of the fight. He stayed in the hotel where the fight was held, but he actually just spent the majority of the fight gambling. He watched actually the fight on TVs at the casino hall. And while doing so, tons of pictures were captured of Tupac of his final moments. He's having the best time of his life, but he didn't realize that a few hours later, he'd be fatally wounded on the Las Vegas Strip. So he's having a good time. He makes his way back into the lobby with he and his affiliates. When Trayvon Trey Lane notices a guy that looks rather peculiar. I don't know. This is what I imagine is going through his head. I don't know. That guy looks familiar. I feel like I've seen him before. I feel like he owes me something or took something from me. I don't know. I can't. That's the motherfucker that robbed me at the mall 6 months prior. That is Orlando Baby Lane Anderson. So Trayvon Trey Lane then proceeds to nudge Tupac on the shoulder. Hey, Pac. Hey, man, that's the dude that robbed me at the mall and took my chain, bro. He's right over there, man. And Tupac, blinded with testosterone and just loyalty, makes a beeline, cutting across the lobby. All of this is captured on the surveillance footage or surveillance cameras that are in the MGM Grand. Tupac can be seen making a beeline across the lobby with his affiliates following him, including Suge Knight, Trayvon Lane, and they begin beating the absolute dog shit out of Orlando Anderson in front of the entire crowded lobby of the MGM Grand Hotel after the Mike Tyson fight. So it's a big ass crowd that's watching this man be meleeed. And one thing about Orlando Baby Lane Anderson is he was a known killer. This guy was very respected in the streets of Compton where he came from because of his background and his quickness to violence and anger. So imagine the level of disdain that he feels for Tupac and his entourage after he is completely humiliated in front of the entirety of the MGM Grand Hotel. And so the fight ensues. It lasts for about 5-10 minutes. And at 9 p.m., the brawl ends. And Tupac and his entourage begin making a swift exit out of the MGM casino and back to the hotel where his girlfriend and cousin, Kidada Jones, were there waiting for his arrival. Tupac, all hyped up on his one-punch knockout of Baby Lane, begins to tell Kidada Jones the story of what happened in almost a celebratory manner. He's rather proud of the fact that he got revenge for his death row affiliate, as well as got his chain back. And so after their personal post-fight celebration, Tupac, Kidada Jones, the whole crew, they make their way for the lobby, and they all load up into their vehicles, and they begin to make their way for Suge Knight's mansion that he owned in Las Vegas, Nevada. And on the way to their mansion, we can bring the story back to Orlando Anderson. He's questioned by authorities in the lobby of the MGM hotel, and he is released. He's set free. And shortly after that, he connects with a Mr. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis. Now, as of recently, you've seen the mugshot of Dwayne Keefe D. Davis all over Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, the news, because he is the one that was arrested in connection with the murder of Tupac. And he is also the uncle of Orlando Anderson. Now, Keefe D was, if Orlando Anderson was respected in the neighborhood of Compton, California, the streets of Compton, California, then Keefe D was worshipped in the neighborhood of Compton, California. This guy played a pivotal role in the drug kingpin era of Compton, California. He was on top. As far as the criminal underbelly of Compton, California was concerned, he was one of the figureheads, a bit of a celebrity, if you will. And so you would imagine that Orlando Anderson goes and tells Keefe D, who was also there in Las Vegas in attendance of the fight, of what ensued. And it's believed that that conversation is where they etched up their plan later on that night. They all pile into a older white 4-door Cadillac, and they hit the streets of Las Vegas with no specific destination in mind, but a specific person in mind. So now we're going to jump back over to Tupac Shakur. They finally arrive at the mansion of Suge Knight. They do their partying. They do their pregame celebration. And once all that is said and done, they again load everyone back up into their vehicles, and they make their way for Club 662, where Tupac is scheduled to perform that night for one of the producers of Death Row and her birthday celebration. And as they're loading up and piling up into their vehicles, a key conversation is had with Tupac and Frank Alexander, the head of the security team for Tupac Shakur. Now, Frank Alexander, he was not affiliated with the MOB Blood Gang. He was actually a legit security guard. And so, he was the head of the operation. And Tupac pulls him to the side as they're leaving and says that, hey, Me and Suge Knight, we're gonna go, we're gonna drive by ourselves. I want you to drive with Kadada Jones and my cousin to not only make sure they're okay, but to save up space in all the other vehicles, because I want you to also be the designated driver to make sure that we all get home safely after the party, because we're going to get fucked up, you know? And so again, despite better judgment, Frank Alexander agrees to have Tupac and Suge Knight ride in their BMW alone to the venue, while Frank Alexander escorts Kadada Jones and Tupac's cousin to the venue. So they exit the neighborhood of Suge Knight's mansion and make their way to Club 662, which was situated in the heart of Las Vegas. And so they're making their drive, and the convoy is back in the city of Las Vegas, Nevada, back on the Strip. And they make their way onto Flamingo Boulevard. And as they're driving down this busy, bustling Las Vegas Strip, they are bombarded with fans of Tupac who are very excited, very ecstatic to see him. I mean, at the time, this guy was an absolute living legend. And so to see this guy driving right past you on the Las Vegas Strip, I mean, your mind's blown. We were sitting right next to Suge Knight, another legend of that time. I mean, so it's what some would describe as like pandemonium. I mean, there's cars honking, people hanging out of the cars. Hey, Tupac, Tupac. And of course, Tupac, being a man of the people, lowers his window down, and he is now hanging out of the window on the Las Vegas Strip, serenading and greeting his fans, and even inviting a lot of his fans to Club 662, telling them to fall in line, follow the convoy. You're going to come with us to Club 662, and you're going to see me perform. I mean, he was a real man of the people. He was excited. I mean, the feeling in the air that night was good vibes. You know, so I guess Tupac may have felt that his previous paranoia that day was perhaps misguided or misjudged, and he seems to really let his guard down. At the same time that a older, white, four-door Cadillac passes by. Driving the Cadillac is Terrence Brown, nicknamed T Brown, DeAndre Dre Smith, with Dwayne Keefe D. Davis in the front passenger seat. Located directly behind him is Orlando Baby Lane Anderson. Disgruntled, half beaten up, humiliated, and desperately seeking revenge of some sort. Now, Tupac, the man of the people, is hanging out of his window, signaling for fans to fall in line and follow them to Club 662, is spotted by Orlando Anderson, and they begin to join the convoy, and they fall right in line. Moments before Tupac reaches the intersection of Flamingo Boulevard and Koval Lane in Las Vegas, Nevada, he is spotted by a fan who proceeds to snap a photograph of Tupac. This photo would later become one of the most famous photos taken in all of hip hop history, but even pop culture in general. The photo that was taken is the last photograph of Tupac Shakur alive. Now, in that vehicle, you see Suge Knight with his eyes locked on the road as he is driving the vehicle. In the passenger seat, you have Tupac, who is looking directly into the lens of the camera that is snapping his final moments. And in that picture, I'll have it posted here somewhere, a lot of people seek to study that picture because there is a look in the eyes of Tupac Shakur that would not suggest that his longtime best friend Mike Tyson just defeated a mighty foe in Bruce Seldon in one of the biggest heavyweight championship fights of all time. No. The eyes of Tupac would not suggest that he was on his way to perform at his own nightclub, 662, for a beloved producer of Death Row, being followed by dozens of his fans who absolutely adored him. No. The eyes of Tupac in that photo would not suggest a man who is enjoying his newfound freedom after being released from a 11-month prison sentence and is enjoying the accolades that would follow a triple platinum album released that summer. No. In that photograph, the eyes of Tupac would suggest a man that is worried, that is deeply concerned about something, that is riddled with anxiety about the future, about what is to come. And so again, this further fuels the speculation that, damn, this guy knew something was going to happen. He must have knew. So the photo is snapped, and Tupac and the convoy, they're stopped at a red light at that intersection of Koval Lane and Flamingo Boulevard. And shortly after being stopped, that same white four-door Cadillac could be seen squeezing its way ever so slowly up past the cars in the convoy, almost as if it's cutting in line or something. Driving at a steady pace, but getting ever so slower as it approaches the 750 BMW that Tupac and Suge Knight were driving in. The vehicle then comes to a stop with the back passenger seat window rolled down on the left side, completely parallel right next to the passenger seat of Tupac's vehicle where he is sitting. An arm could be seen slowly lifting itself with the silhouette of a Smith & Wesson Glock 22 aiming at Tupac and Suge Knight. "13 bullets are then fired from the gun directly into the vehicle of Tupac, where Tupac and Suge Knight are both struck collectively 6 times in total, with Tupac Shakur absorbing 5 of those bullets and the head of Suge Knight absorbing 1, which the bullet is still lodged into the head of Suge Knight today. But Tupac Shakur is shot 2 times in the chest, once in his right lung, once in the arm, and 1 bullet enters the thigh of Tupac Shakur, where it severs a major artery and is believed to be the lethal shot that would kill Tupac Shakur 6 days later. Boom, 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 boom. So those shots rang out. Chaos and panic shortly ensues. And Suge Knight, also in a state of panic and perhaps delirium after being shot in the head, proceeds to step on the gas. Suge Knight hangs a hard left around the block. The murder vehicle, the white Cadillac, proceeds to hang a hard right around the block. And so they separate, and Suge Knight, again in a state of panic, drives around the block and almost ends up on Flamingo Boulevard and Koval Lane once again, where he strikes the sidewalk and flattens the tire and damages the vehicle so much so that it won't turn on anymore. And so they're now stranded in the same intersection that Tupac was gunned down in. They begin to spill out of their vehicles, and while this is happening, this is Las Vegas we're talking about, the Strip to be exact, so it's riddled with police units. Now, the Las Vegas Strip is known for not having actual police vehicles, but bike cops. And that is when a Mr. Chris Carroll takes notice of the chaos. He gets radioed in of the shooting that happens, says, I'm rather close to this. Let's see what the fuck's going on. So he hops on his bike and he proceeds to the scene of the crime, where he is met with the entire entourage and fans completely surrounding Koval Lane and Flamingo Boulevard, so much so to the point that they stop traffic. And so it's at a complete dead stop. It's a standstill. He makes his way through the crowd, where he sees a giant 6'5", rather hefty man in Suge Knight with blood spewing out of the side of his head where he was shot, yelling for Tupac. Pac! Pac! These are direct quotes. Pac! He just kept yelling, Pac, 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 over and over again. Pac's not responding. The officer, Mr. Chris Carroll, makes his way to the vehicle where Tupac is still in the passenger seat, slumped over. One of the bullets actually damaged the door to the point where it was wedged shut. And so Chris Carroll begins to yank on the door, almost breaking the handle off. And finally, he opens the door, and Tupac literally spills out of the vehicle. Him, being a police officer, tries to assess the situation and get an understanding of why this young man is in the state that he's in, when he immediately realizes that he's been shot and he is dying before him. So he begins to try to get some questioning out of Tupac, who was still at the time barely coherent, to maybe gain an understanding from their direct witness, the victim of the situation, to know what happened. He begins to ask Tupac, what happened? You were shot. Do you recognize who shot you? Do you have any enemies who may want to hurt you? These are all vital questions that could have really shortened this whole period of who shot Pac, right? This 26 years we've been asking that question. If Pac would have answered those questions, it may have reduced the whole manhunt. But instead, Pac, being the charged up political figure that he was, who at the time had a deep disdain for police, looks Chris Carroll in the eyes, and with Every depleting bit of strength left in his veins says, "Fuck you," to the officer who was there to help, let's be honest. You can't blame Tupac, man. I mean, the same things that you would look at him and say, well, that was rather foolish. That was rather unnecessary. That didn't seem very well thought out. Are the same things that make him so beloved to this day. He didn't look at that police officer and say, "Fuck you," because that was the cool thing to do. He looked at the police officer and said, "Fuck you," because he was a man of principle. And of course, this is coming directly after, 2-3 years after the Rodney King riots, the tension between inner city black and brown communities and police officers in Los Angeles, Tupac's hometown, as well as all over the country for that matter, was at some of the worst that it's ever been. Tupac saw a struggling community of people that looked just like him and shared his culture and ethnicity and heritage, and saw the way that they were being treated by the police at the time. He didn't believe, and he could be quoted saying that he didn't believe that all cops were bad, but in his final moments of delirium, I don't think he had the wherewithal to differentiate. In his final moments, with everything that he stood for, I think it's safe to say that he didn't want to spend that time being questioned by the Las Vegas Police Department, even if it was their every intention to only help. So he utters those words, "Fuck you," and nobody knew at the time that those words would be the last words that he'd ever speak. Because shortly after that, he takes his final breath and he loses consciousness. And he is rushed to University Medical Center, where he spends the following 6 days in a seduced coma, undergoing countless surgeries, having his right lung removed because it had completely collapsed, and writing out what would be his final days. Until on the 6th day, September 13th, 1996, the oh so powerful and graceful mother of Tupac pulls the plug, thus concluding the life and reign of the most prolific figure in hip-hop history. Just like that, it's over. Now, I want to go back 6 days from that point. We're now back on the Las Vegas Strip. That white Cadillac approaches, fires 13 rounds into the vehicle of Tupac and Suge Knight, and drives off, where the assailants in said vehicle believe that they got off scot-free. Now, it is believed that Orlando Anderson being blinded with rage and revenge, is the one who fired the weapon, which I believe to be the case. I mean, he had every motive to. It is also believed that his uncle, Keefe D, is the one who handed him the murder weapon. Now, I say believed, but I say that ever so loosely. Because at this point, especially what we know now, it's almost a fact that Keefe D handed Orlando Anderson the gun, and Keefe D himself is not the murderer, despite what the headlines you see are saying. Now, I say it's almost fact because Keefe D gets away scot-free. Terrence T. Brown, the driver of the white Cadillac, gets away scot-free. DeAndre Dre Smith, the one sitting right next to Orlando Brown, gets away scot-free. Orlando Anderson gets away scot-free. Orlando Anderson gets away scot-free. Now, Orlando Anderson, being the hothead that he was, gets into a drug deal gone bad 2 weeks later. A few months later, following the shooting, and he himself is gunned down at a car wash in Los Angeles, California. Terrence T. Brown, the driver of said vehicle, also is killed prematurely. DeAndre Dre Smith, the person sitting next to Orlando Anderson during the shooting, is also killed prematurely, leaving one man alive, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis. We're going to flash forward now. We're going to completely leave the 90s. We're actually going to get into the 2010s. Dwayne is enjoying his retirement from both the gang world and the drug empire that he built. And he says, you know what? I'm going to write a tell-all book about the night that Tupac was shot. Because who better to tell the story than the men who shot him? So him being high on his horse not only writes a chapter book detailing by the hour how they murdered Tupac, but he then goes on a press run where he sits in multiple interviews, hours long each, going into even more detail about the night that he and his associates killed Tupac. And so me, being a huge Tupac fan, I began watching these interviews. This is 3 years ago. And even myself, with my zero criminal past and my zero gang affiliation and my zero affiliation to any criminal lifestyle at all, even I know that, holy shit, this guy is cooked. Because the case had gone cold. It was a cold case, not a closed case. Big difference. A cold case is a case that is still open, but dormant due to lack of evidence. Evidence needed to persecute the assailant. Evidence that Keefe D began divulging in multiple interviews, as well as a tell-all book. And so the LVPD, the LAPD, and the FBI began to sit back and they become a fan, just like me. And they sit back and they read the book. They watch all the interviews and they take their notes. And they say, holy shit, we got our guy. This big dumb idiot is sitting there on all these major hip hop media outlets, divulging all the information that we need to take him down. I recall in one of those interviews, this fucking guy, it's so funny. It's actually a DJ Vlad interview, one of my favorite interviewers in the hip hop, world. He's interviewing Keefe D for like the third time. He had done like 3 interviews at the time, at this point. He had done 3 interviews at this point. And in one of the interviews, he tells Vlad a piece of information that Vlad sees as real juicy. Of course, it was concerning the night that Tupac was shot, but DJ Vlad, he wants a follow-up to this piece of information that was just divulged. And he says, man, so let's get more into that. Can you kind of elaborate on that? Exactly what you mean by you handing him the gun? You handing Orlando Anderson the gun? And at that moment in the interview, you could see a man who was well over the hump in his 60s, who was torn between a lifestyle of fame and clout in his telling all of the Tupac shooting and the fame that resulted from it, and a man that was still tied to his youth as a kingpin and gang leader and wanting to uphold that code of silence and no snitching and no cooperating with the authorities and no telling of information. So he's split. And in that moment, when DJ Vlad asked him to elaborate, he decides that he's going to now uphold his youthful code of the streets. And he tells Vlad, you know what, babe? I'm going to just keep it gangster. I ain't even trying to speak on all that, man. I don't do all that talking. I'm going to just keep it gangster. To which Vlad then almost immediately responds with, okay, well, I'll just read it out of the book then. Because every bit of information that you'd want about the murder of Tupac, he had written about in the book. So there is nothing for this man to hide at this point. It's all out in the open. And so the authorities sit on this evidence for 3 years. They sit on these interviews and they feel that they have enough evidence to issue a warrant for Mr. Keefe D's house. And last week, Mr. Keefe D's house was raided. And allegedly in that raid, I'm not sure what was found, but it was enough evidence to indict Mr. Keefe D, putting the man responsible for the killing, not the killer himself, but the man responsible and a man closely associated with the killing of Tupac behind bars, giving us the justice that we so craved for the past 26 years. So the man that was arrested is not the killer, Mr. Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, but is in fact his old crusty ass uncle, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, who is stuck in his youth trying to relive his rock star days and gain as much clout and money as possible from the killing of Tupac Shakur. Shoots himself in the foot and will spend the last few days of his life imprisoned. And that is the final 24 hours of Tupac Shakur and the ill fate that the men who murdered him met. My name is Iman. This has been another episode of The Midnight Show. I appreciate you guys all for tuning in this time around. If you stuck around this long in the video, thank you. If you like what you see, make sure to comment, subscribe. You guys are on YouTube. You know what the fuck to do. I'll leave my email, my Instagram handle, my social media handles in the description below. Please reach out if there's a topic that you would like me to discuss. And until next time, I thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you then. Peace.